The jukebox stuttered mid-song the moment his fingers caught her collar. Denim scraped leather, a bar stool rattled, and the whole room inhaled at once as the biker's fist tightened. One tug, just one, and the top seam of the waitress's shirt gave, with a sound like paper tearing. A swallow of fabric slipped, and in the hollow above her heart, a tattoo flashed, two small hands, cupping a motorcycle, circled by a blue ribbon and the words, "Not one more." There was also an old, puckered scar shaped like a crescent moon. It wasn't the kind of reveal that draws whistles. It was the kind that makes the air colder. The biker's jaw froze. So did everyone else. From the pool table to the doorway, the bar went so quiet that you could hear the clock behind the liquor shelf arguing with itself. Tick, tock, tick. Before we go on, if this moment already has your heart beating, please support Whispers of Kindness. Like, share, comment what you would have done if you were there. And subscribe so you don't miss stories that turn hard nights into human ones. Her name was Dani, though most regulars at Casey's just called her D. She wore her dark hair in a braid because it stayed out of the way of the coffee urn, the tray, and the endlessness that comes with small-town nights. A second job sat in the shadows of her smile, the kind of smile that made you think she'd already done the hard part for you, and you only owed her a thank you. Dani's family had owned a motorcycle once. Her dad taught her to balance using a broomstick as a pretend handlebar before she ever rode a real bike. Then a truck driver fell asleep on Highway 6 and swung wide into their lane. After that, her mother refused to hear the sound of an engine. The bike was sold, the house was nearly sold, and the only reason it wasn't was the diner that hired Dani at 16 and the bar that kept her in tips. When the diner shut down, the man with his hand on her shirt was Cole Riker, a name that ricocheted through town like a rumor with boot prints. He rode with the Scorpions on weekends and alone on weeknights, carrying something the throttle couldn't outrun. People said he'd been Army and came home with nightmares that didn't salute. People said a lot of things. Cole didn't correct them. The truth was simpler and uglier. He was angry. And anger, if you feed it gasoline, will grow teeth. He'd come into Casey's that night because his phone held a message he couldn't swallow. An old friend from the unit had lost his battle to the bottle. Grief is a poor driver. It took him to the bar and parked him badly. It began with a spilled beer. Not much, just a slop along the rim when Dani set the pint down. Cole saw it as disrespect, as carelessness thrown at him by the universe that had already mishandled too many men he loved. He said a rough word. She apologized and grabbed a towel. He said another. The room shifted. A couple at the corner table went quiet. Dani kept her voice low. "I'll comp it." Cole heard condescension where there was only kindness. He stood taller than the space allowed and the chair legs scraped like a threat. Then his fingers were at her collar and the seam surrendered. After the fabric tore and the tattoo showed, nobody moved. Cole breathed once, twice. His hand released as if he'd grabbed a live wire. The words, "Not one more," glared up at him. Words from a charity ride he'd joined 3 summers ago when the Scorpions pretended for an afternoon to be saints, raising money for families who lost riders on the highway. The emblem had been everywhere that day. On patches, on flags, on the shirt he kept in the bottom of his dresser, still smelling faintly of sunscreen and gasoline. The blue ribbon meant remembrance. The 2 hands meant care. The scar beneath the ink meant the story was older than the night. Dani covered the tear with her palm. She didn't cry. Dani rarely cried in public. It was a boundary she'd built to keep other people from using her tears as mirrors for their own. The bar's owner, Casey, stepped out from the tap with his hands up, the fatherly sort of gesture that says, "I know I'm supposed to keep peace, even if my knees hurt." "Cole," he said, "you want to sit or you want to leave?" In a corner, someone whispered, "Call Jim," meaning the deputy, meaning the law. "Don't," Dani said, louder than she felt. "Please, give me a minute." She looked at Cole, not past him, not around him, but at him, and saw a man stranded on a road nobody else could map. She saw the tremor in the hand that had torn her shirt, and the way his mouth kept trying to form the word sorry and failing. She thought of her dad after the crash, how he shouted at the toaster when bread got stuck, as if small malfunctions were proof the universe kept betraying him. Dani had learned the difference between a man who wanted to hurt and a man who didn't know how to do anything else with his hurt. "Sit," she said, "and talk." If the room had been a courtroom, there would have been objections. This isn't safe. This isn't fair. Make him go. But Casey's had always been a place where people believed in conversations that lasted longer than their anger. Cole sat. He didn't deserve it, and he knew it. That was the first good sign. Danny fetched a safety pin from the back and fixed her shirt, the way women have been fixing the world forever, with something small and practical. Then she poured water, because apologies go down easier with clear mouths, and she told him why not one more lived above her heart. My dad taught me to ride, she began. Taught me respect is how you grip the road. He died on Highway 6 because someone forgot that. She touched the scar. This one's from the crash. They weren't sure I'd make it. Turns out I did, just with a different story lined under my skin. I got the tattoo after the memorial ride that year. I pour beers, I plate fries, and I remind people who come in hot that some of us are carrying more than tips home. Cole listened, without fidgeting, which for him was like holding a mountain still. He stared at the words as if they were a map out of a town. He hadn't wanted to leave, but couldn't afford to stay in. After she finished, he told his part, only the pieces he could say without crumbling. He talked about the deployment in the desert, and the way a man's laugh can echo after you've already folded the flag. He said the name of the friend he'd lost that afternoon. He said sorry once and then again. Challenges followed them like weather. Danny had hospital bills that arrived with the stealth of winter, the kind that collects on the sill and makes you think you'll be warm if you just keep moving, only to realize the cold moves too. She had a mother whose memory misfiled simple things, keys in the freezer, birthdays in November instead of May. She had a little brother, Milo, who lived with autism and who could fix almost any gadget but struggled when strangers changed the plan. Danny worked 2 jobs and 3 shifts inside her own head. Grief shift, hope shift, tomorrow shift. Cole, for his part, had anger that woke him like a false fire alarm and shook him until he did something foolish, just to make the shaking stop. He had a club full of men who measured love in loyalty and loyalty in silence. He had a red F-150 with a dented door and a bank account that was always a week behind its dreams. And now he had this, the guilt of a hand he wished he hadn't used and the chance to decide what it would mean next. The room thawed. People returned to conversations, though their ears kept one chair tilted toward the table where the impossible truce was unfolding. Casey brought Cole a coffee and set it down like a treaty and brought Danny a new shirt from his daughter's drawer in the office. Soft cotton, pale blue, not one more covered. Cole reached for his wallet, not to pay for the coffee but for the hope that money, offered clumsily, might be a way to start over. Danny shook her head. If I take that, she said, you'll think we're even. I don't want even. I want better. Better took shape like a slow photograph. Cole offered to spend the next night at the bar, fixing whatever needed fixing, the wobbly stool, the jukebox that hiccuped over certain tracks, the neon sign in the window that sometimes went dark on the O, making the place red as Casey's pen till midnight. He was good with his hands in the ways that build rather than break. Danny said yes. Casey said please. The regular said we'll see. Apologies are louder when they come with a hammer. That week, Cole showed up with a toolbox and a fresh shirt. No skulls. No club crest. Just a gray tee that said Riker's Custom on the pocket, a shop his father once ran and that he hoped to reopen when the math allowed. He tightened bolts, tested wires, and took orders for burgers during the dinner rush when the grill guy called in sick. He wasn't good at the register, but he was good at carrying plates. Danny showed him the trick, where you balance the tray on the fingertips like a magician who never drops the act. He nearly dropped the act twice. She caught it both times with a laugh and not a scold. One night, while they both stood behind the bar, a father and teenage son came in. The boy's eyes did that distant, floating thing, the look of someone who hears the world as too many channels at once. The father ordered fries and a root beer and asked if Danny could write happy birthday on a napkin because crowds made his kid anxious, and this was as close to a party as he dared. Danny didn't write it. She brought out a small cupcake. She kept in the back for nights that needed saving and a candle. She lit but didn't expect the boy to blow. Breath can be a battle. Cole watched her move with a grace he didn't know how to name. After the father tipped with shaky gratitude, he said to Cole, "You ride?" Cole nodded. The man gave him a card for a volunteer, group that fitted sensory-friendly, helmets for kids. "We could use strong hands," he said. Strong hands and soft voices, Cole thought. And for the first time he believed his could be both. The Scorpions noticed Cole's absence at 2 consecutive Friday meetups and sent USMC a hothead, they called that, for reasons he never earned, to fetch him. The man walked into Casey's like a storm cloud searching for lightning. He saw Cole behind the bar, towel over one shoulder, and smirked. "Domesticating you, huh?" he sneered. "You pouring lattes now, brother?" Cole dried the glass slowly and set it down. "Just coffee," he said. "You want one?" USMC stepped closer, bumping a stool with his knee, making a point of big. "Club's riding south. You're coming." Cole thought of the boy with the cupcake and the father with the careful hope and of Danny's steady voice. He thought of not one more and what exactly he meant by it. Then he said the sentence that scares men who only know how to be men in packs. "I'm working." USMC laughed without humor. "Working? For who?" "The girl you dragged around by the shirt." Danny's hand tightened on the lemon wedge she was slicing. She didn't look up. The room tensed again. The way a place remembers trauma like muscle memory. Casey adjusted his stance. Cole breathed once and chose different. "I'm working for the apology I owe," he said. "I'm working so what I did isn't the last line of my story." The clubman shook his head like he'd discovered a cracked mirror. "You're done," he said, meaning exiled. Meaning the kind of alone that leaves tire marks on reputation. Cole nodded. "Maybe," he said, and felt something uncoil inside him. USMC left, leaving the door swinging and the bell miscounting the seconds. Cole set the glass aside and looked at Danny, and she nodded back, the softest salute. Better isn't a banner. It's a calendar. So they penciled plans. Cole offered to host a not one more bike wash and fundraiser in Casey's parking lot the following Saturday, with proceeds going toward a local fund that paid for adaptive helmets and post-accident physical therapy copays. Danny called the nonprofit, whose director sounded like the kind of exhausted that still says yes. Casey called the city for a one-day permit. The regulars donated car soap, sponges, and the kind of good gossip that draws a crowd. On the morning of the event, Dawn found Cole detailing his dented F-150 and refusing to fix the dent because it reminded him that choices leave marks. Danny wore the blue shirt and tied her hair with a ribbon to match. Milo bagged the muffins he'd helped bake neat as math and set them on a table with a sign. He printed in block letters, "Pay what you want, people came." The old and the young, leather and cotton, the curious and the converted. A pastor arrived on a scooter and laughed at himself first so nobody else had to. A nurse from the hospital brought a box of spare gloves. A new mother, eyes heavy with worry, asked about helmets small enough for toddlers and left with a flyer and a hug she hadn't known she needed. Cole washed bikes with a tenderness he used to save only for carburetors, and when a teenage rider rolled in with a scuffed knee and a prideful grin, he taught the kid how to oil a chain without getting grease in the brakes. Danny worked the donation jar and told anyone who asked about her tattoo. She did not tell the story of the shirt that had ripped. That night belonged to her alone now. Something difficult and private she had turned into light. Mid-afternoon, the fundraiser faced the kind of challenge kindness always meets a sudden summer storm, black-bellied that bulldozed the town sky. People moved to pack up. Cole checked his phone radar and shook his head. 20 minutes, he said, then clear. Danny remembered every time in her life she had not trusted forecasts and decided to trust this one. They hauled canopies from Casey's storage. Mothers held up towels like shields, and teenagers took turns anchoring the legs while wind practiced at being a thief. Rain hammered. Water knocked insistently at the jar of bills. Casey grabbed a roll of tape and made a moat out of plastic plates. The jar bobbed but stayed dry. 21 minutes later, the rain exhausted itself. The sun returned with a sheepish apology. People cheered like the home team had finally remembered how to play. By dusk, the jar was full. The nonprofit's director returned with eyes rimmed red for personal reasons she kept mostly her own, and told Danny and Cole that the total would outfit 19 kids with helmets and cover therapy sessions for 3 more families than she'd hoped. When the crowd thinned, the last to leave was the father and the teenage boy from the other night. The boy touched the "not one more" banner, traced the letters like Braille even though they were paint. The father whispered, "He doesn't say much, but he remembers everything. Tonight he will remember this." Cole swallowed something that felt like a splinter of joy, small and piercing, and evidence of wood becoming furniture. As the lights in Casey's glowed warm behind them, Cole turned to Danny. "About that first night," he said. "I can say sorry 1,000 times and it won't sew it back. Danny considered the tear, the scar, the safety pin, the shirt folded in the back office like a retired flag. She considered the way her body had not been a display but a story, and how he had listened. Then don't sew it back, she said. Let it remind you. Let it mean not one more in more places than the road. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. Cole still woke to a siren that wasn't there. Danny still counted tips like sentences, adding commas where periods should be. But they were better. Cole began bringing his tools to the volunteer garage on Thursdays, teaching kids who liked engines. More than algebra, that torque is simply honesty applied to bolts. He met a therapist who asked him hard questions and let him discover his answers. Danny started a Tuesday night support circle at the bar. No microphones, no speeches, just a table and the rule that whoever held Casey's old bottle opener got to talk without being interrupted. The first night 3 people showed, then 5, then a dozen. Someone's husband came after swearing he wouldn't. Someone's sister laughed for the first time since February. On the 4th week, USMC stood in the doorway, watched for 5 minutes and left without spitting. Progress like weather can be read if you know where to look. One evening, months later, a tourist couple came through town and stopped at Casey's because the neon O was reliably lit now. The woman wore a leather jacket with a patch that read, "Mother rides too," and when she saw Danny's tattoo, she smiled without asking questions. The man ordered 2 burgers and after a pause, a third to go. For the guy in the alley, he said. Didn't want to intrude, but he looks like he hasn't eaten today. Danny peered out and saw a familiar shape, hunched beside the dumpster, a silhouette with a pride problem. She brought the burger out herself. "Hey," she said. "You're welcome inside." The man shrugged, then stood. It was USMC. He took the bag and nodded at the ground. "Heard you fix bikes on Thursdays," he muttered to Cole, who had followed her out. "My clutch sticks." Cole jerked his chin toward the garage across the street. "Bring it by tomorrow," he said. It wasn't forgiveness. It was the first mile of a better road. And here's the thing about that first night, the one that made the bar go quiet enough to hear a clock think. It didn't end with police lights or headlines. It ended and began with a choice. Danny chose not to let harm write the last word. Cole chose to find a word that could follow sorry and make it true. Casey chose to give them a room where their decisions could echo into something useful. The town chose to show up in rain and sun, with sponges and dollar bills and the kind of patience that makes strangers into neighbors. If this story reached you where your own hurt keeps pacing, let it be a map. The challenges they faced were real. The debt that doesn't sleep, the grief that bites, the temper that pretends to be power, the loneliness that breeds loyalty to the wrong things, the storms that crack open your plans. None of it vanished. They didn't become saints or slogans. They became people who refused to let pain audition as destiny. Not one more wasn't just a phrase on Danny's skin. It was homework for her life. Not one more night where rage sets the rules. Not one more mile driven by ghosts. Not one more neighbor treated like a mirror for your anger. Not one more apology without practice attached. Sometime after midnight, when the bar cleaned down to reflections, Cole replaced the safety pin in a small frame behind the counter. Beneath it, a card read, "In case of emergency, hold together." He taped it up beside the photograph from the fundraiser. A row of wet bikes, a sky scoured clean, a jar full of wrinkled bills, a boy's hand reaching toward a letter. He looked at Danny and said, "You saved me in a bar without even moving your feet." She shook her head. "You saved yourself," she answered, "by not leaving." And that is the moment the silence in Casey's turned into something else. The quiet after rain when the earth is listening for seeds. If this story touched you, tell us how. Drop a comment on this video with the moment that changed you, or the apology you're ready to make. And please support the channel, like, share, and subscribe to Whispers of Kindness so we can keep telling the stories that remind us we are all repairable.